The evening light over Portland, Oregon had a quiet sadness to it, as if the sun itself was exhausted from shining on people who carried too many secrets. Inside a small apartment on Hawthorne Boulevard, Emily Carter stood at the kitchen counter, hands trembling over the dishes. The clinking of plates wasn't just noise. It was the sound of her unsaid frustrations, her unasked questions, her unexpressed fears. The clock on the wall ticked with the cold patience of time itself. 8:17 p.m. He was late again. She closed her eyes, inhaling a breath that felt heavier than usual. There was a time when waiting for him felt like waiting for spring, soft, warm, promising. But now, it felt like waiting for a storm you were already drenched in. The door opened softly. Daniel Hayes stepped inside. His shoulders drooped, jacket slightly askew, steps unsteady, as if each foot carried the weight of a burden he couldn't put down. Emily didn't turn, not immediately. She let him stand there, swallowing his silence. Then finally, late again. Her voice sounded sharper than she intended, but pain often borrowed the tone of anger. Daniel forced a small smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. Sorry, work was a lot today. Work. That word had become a stranger in their home. It didn't bring money or security. It brought distance, trembling hands, dull eyes, and a hollowed-out husband whose soul seemed to be fading day by day. Emily turned and saw it again. The exhaustion painted across his face like a bruise. His skin looked paler, his lips dry, his eyes carrying a storm behind them. "Dinner is cold," she said, but the fire had gone out of her voice. Daniel lowered his gaze. He didn't defend himself, didn't argue, didn't explain. Just walked slowly to the chair, as if his bones were made of sorrow instead of calcium. He took 2 bites, struggled to swallow, then gently pushed the plate away. "You didn't eat," Emily whispered. He nodded faintly. Not very hungry. But she saw the truth. His hands were shaking. Not from hunger, from something deeper. He stood up after a moment. "I'm going to lie down." Emily watched him walk to the bedroom, his steps wobbling as if every motion hurt. Something stabbed inside her chest. A small pain she tried to silence, because loving someone sometimes meant watching them fall apart, one unspoken moment at a time. She leaned against the counter, eyes burning with unshed questions. Why was he weaker? Why were his clothes always stained near the sleeves? Why did he keep hiding things behind tired smiles? Why did she feel him slipping away, even when he stood only a few feet from her? That night, the apartment felt like a graveyard of old conversations, full of words that had died before being spoken. Emily lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Daniel breathe beside her, each breath thick and heavy, as if his lungs were carrying stones. She turned toward him. He slept with a strange stillness, the kind that made her heart stutter, as if even rest brought him pain. Outside, the Oregon rain began to fall, soft and cold, whispering against the glass, the same way her heart whispered inside her chest. Something is wrong. Something is terribly, painfully wrong. And the night hid the truth, but it would not hide forever. The next morning arrived cloaked in a pale, silvery fog that rolled in from the Willamette River. Portland had a habit of disguising sorrow in mist, but Emily woke with the kind of heaviness that fog could not hide. Daniel was standing near the stove, pouring coffee with hands that trembled just slightly, the kind of tremble only a person who loved him would notice. He turned with a smile that felt like a patchwork of fading hope. "Morning," he said softly. Emily studied him. His cheekbones looked sharper, his skin waxy. There were faint bluish shadows beneath his eyes. That had nothing to do with lack of sleep. "Morning," she replied, her voice gentler than last night. "You didn't sleep well." He hesitated. "No, actually, I slept fine." "Lie." She heard it in the pause, the wavering tone. He wasn't just tired. He was breaking. He reached for his travel mug, but his hand slipped slightly. Coffee dripped onto the floor. He froze. Emily stepped forward. "Daniel, what's going on with you?" His eyes widened. Not with guilt, but with fear. "Nothing. I'm okay. Just stressed." He grabbed his jacket too quickly, almost stumbling, and Emily saw it. The same faint stain near his cuff. Not dirt, not oil, not food, something darker, almost rust. Before she could speak, he pressed a kiss on her forehead. Light, hurried, trembling. "I love you. I'll see you tonight." And then he left. Emily stood motionless. The apartment felt too quiet, too hollow, too full of ghosts she couldn't name. She walked to the bedroom and sank onto the bed. Her chest tightened with a fear she couldn't articulate. Her marriage had become a collection of half-answers and fading glimpses of a man she once knew better than herself. Was he in trouble? Was he sick? Was he hiding something to protect her? Or hiding something from her? Her phone buzzed. A message from her friend Alyssa. "Are you okay? You sounded off yesterday." Emily stared at the screen. "Am I okay?" The truth was, she didn't know. She didn't know anything anymore. Because love had turned into a shadow, and shadows always hinted at something standing just out of sight. The day moved slowly, painfully. Emily tried to distract herself with work emails, laundry, small tasks. But anxiety coiled around her like a cold hand. When evening came, the silence grew into a weight she couldn't bear. She sat on the couch, waiting for Daniel, heart pounding with dread. Every minute felt like a drip of ice water down her spine. When the door finally opened, Daniel stepped in. But differently, slower, shoulders shaking slightly. She stood instantly. "Daniel?" He looked at her, eyes glossy with a pain he wasn't ready to name. "I need to shower," he said, voice cracking. But as he walked past her, something slipped from his jacket pocket. A small folded paper. He didn't notice. Emily did. Her heart hammered as she picked it up. It was a medical receipt. From a clinic she had never heard of. With Daniel's name on it. And one word circled in red ink. Follow-up, urgent. Her breath shattered in her lungs. The fog outside thickened. But the fog inside her heart was darker than Portland's sky had ever seen. Emily didn't sleep. Rain beat softly against the windows. But inside her chest, a storm roared. Morning came without light. Daniel left too early, mumbling something about being late. But Emily had already made her decision. She waited 10 minutes, then grabbed her keys, and followed. Her car trailed his blue Honda Civic through the wet streets of Portland. Past coffee shops they once called their places. Past bridges where they used to walk on weekends. Past pieces of their old life that now felt like ruins. Daniel turned onto a street she'd never seen before. Division Street, farther east than they usually went. He parked near a small building with a faded blue door. A sign above read, "Riverbend Community Health Clinic." Not a workplace. Not a friend's house. Not anything he ever mentioned. Emily's pulse hammered in her throat. Daniel walked inside. Slowly, shoulders hunched, one hand pressed discreetly to his side, as if trying to hold himself together. She waited until the door shut behind him. Then stepped out of the car, legs trembling. Inside, the lobby smelled of antiseptic and rain-soaked coats. A receptionist greeted her politely. "Can I help you?" Emily swallowed hard. She didn't want to say his name. It felt like betrayal. Yet so did silence. She was about to turn away when she heard voices. Daniel's, from behind a half-closed door. Emily froze as a doctor spoke. "Daniel, your condition has progressed faster than expected. You need to stop overworking. You're putting dangerous strain on your body." Emily's lungs forgot how to breathe. Daniel's voice cracked. "I don't have a choice. My wife, she doesn't know. And I won't make her worry." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. The doctor sighed. You can't hide this forever. Your internal bleeding is getting worse. If you keep pushing, you could. He didn't finish. Daniel whispered, please, just help me get through a few more weeks. Emily stumbled back, her heart breaking into pieces she didn't know how to hold. Daniel wasn't cheating. He wasn't lying for selfish reasons. He wasn't living a double life. He was dying, quietly, alone, protecting her from the pain. By burying his own, tears blurred her vision as she slipped out of the clinic. Before Daniel could see her, the sky outside had darkened. Clouds hung low and heavy. But nothing felt as heavy as the truth inside her chest. Daniel Hayes, the man she loved, the man she had accused, the man she had doubted, was fighting a battle with his own failing body, and he had been doing it alone because he loved her. Emily drove home in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that screams behind your ribs. She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Her mind replayed every moment. She'd misunderstood him. Every accusation, every cold remark, every time she thought he was pulling away. All this time, he wasn't leaving her. He was trying to stay, trying to survive long enough to make sure she would be okay. If he couldn't stay, the thought broke her. Hours passed. Rain whispered against the windows. Her phone buzzed. Daniel texting, home in 20, you want anything? Her heart clenched. She typed back, just come home safe. When Daniel entered the apartment, Emily stood waiting, tears rimmed in her eyes. He froze. What's wrong? She stepped forward, but words failed. How could she tell him she knew? How could she face the truth when she could barely breathe around it? So, instead, she wrapped her arms around him. With a desperation she couldn't hide, Daniel stiffened in surprise, then slowly held her back. His heartbeat trembling against her cheek. You okay? He whispered. No, she wasn't. She was shattering. But she couldn't say it. Not yet. Instead, she whispered, stay with me tonight. Don't work. Don't go anywhere. Just be here. He kissed her forehead softly. I'm not going anywhere. But Emily heard the truth. Behind his gentle voice, the truth she now knew too well. He wanted to stay. He tried to stay. But his body, his fragile, failing body, was no longer listening to him. She held him tighter, as if her arms could stop fate itself. But even love, sometimes isn't strong enough to fight the darkness approaching. The next week was a blur of fragile moments. Daniel tried harder than ever to appear normal, cracking small jokes, making coffee for her, holding her hand while they watched old movies. But Emily saw everything now. The wince he hid behind a forced smile, the way his fingers pressed subtly against his ribs, the way he paused mid, as if pain lived inside his lungs. Every moment felt like holding sand, trying to keep something precious from slipping away grain by grain. One night, he collapsed. It happened in the hallway. Just as he reached for his jacket, a sharp gasp escaped him. His knees buckled, and he caught himself against the wall. With a groan he couldn't swallow. Emily ran to him. Daniel. He tried to stand, but his body twisted with pain. I'm fine, he whispered. Just 2 words. But they sounded like a dying flame, trying to pretend it was still alive. Emily knelt beside him, hands shaking. Stop saying that. Please, stop pretending you're okay. His eyes widened. A flicker of fear, a flicker of understanding. She knew. Daniel's shoulders slumped. He leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes, like a man surrendering the truth he never wanted to share. How long have you known? He asked softly. Long enough, she whispered. Too long. Tears filled his eyes, not from pain, but from the grief of disappointing her. I didn't want to hurt you, he said. I didn't want you to carry this. Emily shook her head. You don't protect someone by dying in front of them silently. Daniel looked away, jaw trembling. I just wanted you to have a life that wasn't filled with hospitals and fear. Emily cupped his face gently. Daniel Hayes, you are my life. I don't want a world without you. Even if you're hurting. Even if it's hard. I want you. His breath hitched. A tear escaped. For the first time, he let himself break in her arms. The following days unfolded like a storm that refused to break. Chicago's skies mirrored the heaviness inside their apartment. Gray, endless, and thick with rain. Elizabeth moved through the rooms with quiet vigilance. Careful not to startle Daniel. Careful not to let him notice the fear that clung to her like a second skin. Daniel tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. He brewed coffee for her each morning, shuffled carefully to the living room to read the newspaper, and even attempted a few light chores around the apartment. But every small motion seemed borrowed from a body that was already fragile beyond repair. He smiled at her, but the smile was more a mask than an expression. And Elizabeth saw the tremor in his hands, the subtle hitch in his breathing, the way he leaned slightly to one side as if the pain itself had found a permanent residence in his chest. Lizzie. Daniel's voice was low, hesitant, almost afraid to sound loud. Yes, she replied softly, careful not to push him. I don't want to be a burden, he said, barely above a whisper. Elizabeth stopped in her tracks. Daniel, you're not a burden. You never were. But she knew he heard what he wanted to hear. The fear, the shame, the weight of failing her. Doctors' visits became part of their daily rhythm, each one a reminder that time was not on their side. Elizabeth sat beside him during tests, held his hand during scans, and watched the color drain from his face with every report. Daniel's condition, internal bleeding caused by a rare degenerative vascular disorder, was worsening faster than anticipated. One evening, they sat in the hospital's rooftop garden. The city sprawled beneath them, lights twinkling like distant stars, a cruel contrast to the heaviness in their hearts. Daniel leaned back against Elizabeth, his hand weakly clutching hers. It's beautiful tonight, he whispered, voice strained. Elizabeth nodded, tears threatening to spill. Yes, it's beautiful, but so is every day I get to spend with you. Even now. He smiled faintly, and for a moment, it seemed as though the world paused. Lizzie, I'm scared, he admitted. Her chest tightened. I know, she said softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead. And I'm here, always. He closed his eyes and exhaled shakily. I wanted to be strong. For you, for us. I thought I could hide it and protect you from the pain. Elizabeth pressed her lips to his temple. You don't protect anyone by hiding the truth. Strength is not silence. It's letting someone hold your hand when the world is falling apart. Daniel's eyes fluttered open, wet and glossy. Promise me, Lizzie. Promise me if anything happens, you'll keep living. You'll find light again. It is sitting beside someone as their body betrays them. It is holding a hand as life's unfairness presses down. It is feeling the weight of every second together, knowing each breath may be borrowed. That night, as they returned to their apartment, the rain intensified. The streets shimmered with reflections of neon lights, distorted by the wet asphalt, and Elizabeth realized that this storm mirrored the turbulence inside her heart. Daniel collapsed into the couch as soon as they were inside, exhaustion overtaking him in a way that frightened her. Elizabeth knelt beside him, brushing his hair back gently, whispering soft reassurances, feeling his fragile heartbeat press against her hand. Even as his body weakened, even as the disease silently advanced, their bond grew more unshakable. Because survival was no longer enough. They were not merely existing. They were fighting together against time, against fear, against the inevitability of loss. And Elizabeth vowed silently, fiercely, to remain his anchor. even when the tides of mortality threatened to sweep him away. Through the darkness, through the pain, through every trembling breath, one thing remained undeniable: they were not alone. And that, she knew, was enough. It was a Thursday night in Chicago, the kind of night where the wind whispered secrets through the narrow streets and the rain tapped softly against the window pane, as if hesitant to intrude upon the intimacy of human sorrow. The city's neon lights shimmered on puddles outside, fractured and distorted, mirroring the fragile reality inside Elizabeth and Daniel's apartment. Daniel had been weaker all day. Each breath was a labor, shallow and trembling. Each movement seemed to require a monumental effort. Elizabeth had stayed by his side, guiding him, supporting him, holding him as gently as one might cradle a bird with a broken wing. "I'm fine," Daniel murmured, the words barely audible over the rain. But Elizabeth knew the truth. "You're not," she said softly, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "Stop pretending." He turned his head slowly to face her. There was a flicker of fear in his eyes, the same fear she had seen last week at the clinic. When she discovered the full truth of his condition, she reached out and held his hand, feeling the cold, fragile skin beneath her fingers. "Lizzie," he whispered, voice cracking. "I don't want to leave you like this." Her throat tightened. "You're not leaving me. You're here. Breathe, just breathe." He tried. He swallowed. He lifted a trembling hand to brush her cheek. The touch was featherlight, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, 1,000 hidden fears, 1,000 nights spent alone in his pain. Elizabeth pressed her forehead against his. "You're not alone. Not now, not ever." He exhaled shakily, closing his eyes. His chest rose and fell, then rose again. But this time, the rise was weaker, slower. She could feel the rhythm faltering beneath her touch. Panic clawed at her chest, sharp and sudden, and she gripped him tighter. "Daniel, stay with me. Please, stay with me." He opened his eyes for the last time, soft and glassy, gazing at her with a mixture of love and apology that left her breathless. I love you, Lizzie, always." His voice broke in half, his body sagging into hers. Elizabeth's heart shattered in the silence that followed. She could hear the rain pounding harder, the city's hum intensifying, but nothing mattered except the stillness of his chest. She shook him gently at first, then harder, her tears falling freely, her sobs echoing in the empty apartment. "Daniel, please, don't leave me." But the night had already taken him. Elizabeth crumpled to the floor, holding his lifeless form close, her tears soaking the fabric of his shirt. Her body shook violently, racked with grief, with disbelief, with rage at the cruel injustice of fate. She felt his pulse one last time, and it was gone. Time became meaningless. The room seemed to contract around her, suffocating, echoing the emptiness she now carried. The rain continued its relentless descent outside, an unfeeling witness to the devastation inside. She whispered his name over and over, hoping, praying, bargaining with a universe that had no mercy. "Daniel, Daniel, please." There were no answers, only the sound of her own grief, jagged and raw. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Elizabeth had no sense of time, only the relentless ache in her chest. She laid her head on his shoulder, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne, a scent she now knew she would carry forever. Through the haze of sorrow, a memory surfaced: Daniel laughing, brushing rain from her hair in Portland, holding her hand tightly as the wind tried to pull them apart, whispering promises of forever. That Daniel, the strong, loving, flawed man, was still here, in her heart, in her bones, in every trembling breath she took. And slowly, a quiet resolve began to form amidst the tears. She would not let this love die with his last breath. She would carry it, fiercely and tenderly, into every day, every moment, every heartbeat that remained. The night stretched on, but Elizabeth did not leave his side. She whispered to him, telling him everything she had never said, how much she loved him, how she regretted doubting him, how she would honor the life they shared. And somewhere in that whispered devotion, she felt a presence, a warmth, a gentle certainty that Daniel was still with her. Not in body, but in the eternal echo of their love. Even as the city slept, Elizabeth Carter sat in the dark, holding the weight of loss, the depth of love, and the fragile hope that their bond would transcend the cruel silence of the night. A breeze stirred the air, brushing her cheek gently. It was not cold, not harsh, just soft, almost tender. She imagined it as his hand, the same one she had held through his illness, guiding her, comforting her, reminding her that love does not end with death. Elizabeth understood now that their story did not conclude with his final breath. Their love had transcended time and space, etched into her memory, into her very being. It was a quiet, stubborn flame that refused to die, flickering in her heart, warming her even in the darkest moments. She returned to the apartment, carrying his journal, and sat by the window overlooking the city's skyline. The streets glimmered with reflections of lights, rain-soaked and bright, a mosaic of possibility. She smiled faintly, feeling both sorrow and solace. Even in his absence, Daniel's love was a compass, guiding her through grief, giving her strength, whispering reassurance in the silent hours. And Elizabeth knew that this bond, tempered by pain, deepened by struggle, eternal in its devotion, would remain with her forever. "Thank you," she whispered into the quiet room, her voice carrying across the apartment, across the memories, across the river of time that separated them. "Thank you for loving me. Always." The city lights flickered, the night held its breath, and Elizabeth, Carter let herself feel the enduring presence of Daniel Hayes, not as a ghost, not as a memory alone, but as love in its purest, most eternal form. And somewhere, in the soft rush of wind and the gentle patter of rain against the windows, it seemed to her that he answered not with words, but with the promise that love, once true, never dies. "I'm still here," she heard in the quiet. "And I always will be." Elizabeth closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely. But this time, they were not only of sorrow, they were of love, of gratitude, and of the kind of peace that comes from knowing that even in the absence of a body, the heart remembers, carries, and never forgets.